The royals' reaction to the Hamas terror attack in Israel, I think, has been interesting to many because they normally position themselves as being totally impartial and politically neutral, and some might have extrapolated from the fact that they've been so vocal in their condemnation of what Hamas has done and used the word terrorist to describe the group, perhaps in contrast to how the BBC has treated the situation. There was even a protester who said, you know, the king is able to call Hamas terrorists, but not the BBC, that it's almost as if the royals have singled themselves out as being members of the sort of high-profile diplomatic community to sort of call out what has happened for what it is. I suppose it's interesting to explore whether that's a risky strategy or whether that's the right approach for the royals to take. And I think we need to look at this with some context, as is probably the case for the whole Israel and Palestine conflict. It's complicated because we've always had a Prince of Wales and now King in Charles, who has shown an interest in the events in Israel and Palestine over the course of the years that he was heir apparent, who has always talked about sort of brokering peace between multi-faith communities. He's actually showed a lot of support for the Palestinians and for Israel in the past. And if we look back to his visit in 2020, he was the most senior member of the royal family ever to visit the occupied territories. And he was very careful during that trip to make sure that he spoke to both sides. He's got a family connection to the area because his own grandmother, that's the Duke of Edinburgh's mother, Princess Alice, was somebody who, during the Second World War, took it upon herself to rescue Jews from the Gestapo after Athens was occupied. Princess Alice made it her mission to try and save some families from the fate of the Holocaust. And that's always obviously been a source of great pride for Prince Charles, now King Charles, and indeed the whole royal family. The Duke of Edinburgh's family history is a bit checkered because on one hand he had these three sisters that all married people who ended up being members of the Nazi Party, but on the other had a mother who took it upon herself to rescue Jews from, frankly, a fate worse than death. I mean, she risks her own life, Princess Alice, to hide Jews in Athens from the Gestapo. And that's always been a source of huge pride, not just for the Duke of Edinburgh, but also, of course, her grandson, the King. When he went out there as Prince Charles, the King very much wanted to visit the Mount of Olives, to see his grandmother's resting place. Indeed, some of the coronation oil that was used at the coronation in May was taken from that area. He was also very keen to speak to leaders on both sides in Bethlehem. He reached out to the Palestinians. He said, "It is my dearest wish that the future will bring freedom, justice and equality to all Palestinians." So this isn't a king that has ever really taken sides. What the royals seem to be doing here, a little bit like their subjects, to be honest, is condemning Hamas for the terrorist atrocity that occurred on October the 7th and continues to occur, with the fate of at least 200 Israeli prisoners unknown. They've been kidnapped and no one knows quite what's happened to them. They are very keen to condemn the terrorist act, but also, I think, to try and be peace envoys on some of these missions that they've made to the Middle East in the past. If we turn to what William did in 2018, again, this was quite seminal. He wasn't the Prince of Wales then, he was just the Duke of Cambridge, but it was significant that he chose to go to the Middle East for 4 days. He visited both sides of the argument, and even at the time, it was significant that as well as meeting Netanyahu, he met with the then Israeli President, Reuven Rivlin, who then said to him, when he was going to go on to meet Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, "I want you to be an agent of peace." He literally used Prince William as a peace envoy and said, "I am asking you to send a message of peace to the Palestinians." That was quite a moment. And it was also a moment for William to try and almost walk in his father's footsteps of trying to say to both sides that, you know, at some point what everybody wants is lasting peace. Although it's not a political statement they're making, They're not going to be overt about calling for two-state solutions. They're basically trying to represent both sides of the argument. Some might see that they've taken a side, if you use the BBC's language on why they haven't called Hamas terrorists. Historically, the royals have always called out terrorist acts when they've seen them. The late Queen would always be the first to release a statement sympathising victims of terror attacks, not just in the UK, but across the Commonwealth. 2 days after the September 11th attacks, she insisted that she show her own personal tribute to the victims of 9/11 by ensuring that Coldstream Guards, who would normally be playing the national anthem and other British music outside Buckingham Palace, actually played the Star-Spangled Banner. Historically, the royals have always made these gestures, so it's entirely fitting and it's traditional for the royals to react in this way. The king branded Hamas terrorists and said he was appalled by the barbaric acts committed in Israel. That's pretty unequivocal. The Prince and Princess of Wales said they were profoundly distressed by what happened. They utterly condemned what happened on October the 7th and said that Israel had a right to defend itself. We also know that the king took it upon himself to set up phone calls with the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Herzog and also King Abdullah of Jordan. There's a long-standing relationship between the Jordanian royals and indeed the royal family. And interestingly, there's another connection to William and Kate there, because Kate spent 3 years as a child living in Jordan. Her father, Michael Middleton, was working for British Airways. The princess has got very fond memories of that area of the Middle East. So this is something that's touched them personally, but it's also something that has brought out in them the role that they do play, which is to try and bring nations together. I mean, they'd see their role as doing this in the Commonwealth, right? Kind of ensuring that this family of nations works well together, interacts well with the UK. But when it comes to Middle Eastern matters, the royals are very, very keen to stress that they aren't taking sides and that want to listen to what the Israelis are doing, but also what the Palestinians are saying, with a view to trying to help broker peace between those two sides. I think moving forward, how is the King and indeed the Prince of Wales going to want to position themselves in this? Well, the King had a multi-faith coronation for a reason. He wants to ensure that he represents all the people of Britain and the Commonwealth, not just select religious groups. And that coronation was meant to reflect people of faith and of none. So I would imagine that he wants to maintain a dialogue with both sides in order to try and engender some sort of dialogue in the future. I mean, I know that looks very difficult now because we are at the heart of this appalling situation in the Middle East that doesn't seem like it has any resolution. But I think we can rest assured that the likes of Charles III and indeed his son William will be trying to do everything they can with their soft, non-political power to try and make the best of a bad situation.